Okay, hello everyone. I think we're still waiting on some people, but they will hopefully be tuning in soon. And so I don't want to say we're on a schedule, but we want to start on time, of course, to respect all of our time and be able to, yeah, listen in on the great event we have here today. We have two guest speakers here today, Puno and Hope, who will soon be introducing themselves, and I will try to introduce them a little bit. And just to welcome all of you here, if you haven't read the message in the chat, let us know how you're feeling today by using an emoji. Zoom has a couple there. Maybe you find one or two to just be able to express your feelings. And yeah, we would love to hear where you're tuning in from. So we always have a very international crowd. I know Puno is in the US, daytime over there. Hope is in South Africa, and I'm tuning in from Münster in Germany. I think my colleague Dome over here is handling all the technical things. Is tuning in from Berlin, and we have people from all over the world. I see Helsinki. Hi, Dorota. Very nice of you to be here, and we are really looking forward to this. So, as a first thing, I want to start off with just, of course, welcoming all of you, but also to just say that we are really, really happy that we basically stalked Puno and Hope into this for a while, and we've had this coming for a few months, and we're super happy that they made it today and made their time and committed to this, and we're really happy to have them here today. Before we get into the whole workshop and before we get into all of the content that we want to share today, let me give a short introduction on basically the event today, what we're going to do, and yeah, how this is going to, where it's actually coming from. So, as you know, Hope and Puno are here today. We want to talk about the role of storytelling in Africafuturism, a very, very interesting topic, I think, not only for futurists around, but just people interested in storytelling and poetry, where both of these the speakers here today are situated and have been professionals in for many, many years. For us, I want to get into a little bit of the rules of Zoom engagement because we, of course, are still in the digital space, and we have a few things that we want to, yeah, that we want to just be able that you know this. We have obviously, since there are many people in this link, mute yourself until you speak. You're of course welcome to raise your hand if you want to speak. We have a few breakout rooms planned as well, so you will be able to reflect, you will be able to get to know other people, and of course speak to our speakers. Another appreciative or a thing we would appreciate is if you have your camera on, if you have a little bit of an participatory spirit to this. And of course, if you see it, we have another Zoom account running here that is recording this session for the people who cannot make it today, and we will be putting this on YouTube later, and have a few things on Instagram where we try to bring out some snippets and kind of capture the content that we are here creating. A few words on us, as you know, and many of you I think have been here before, but we are Speculative Futures Berlin. In the background, we are actually a company called Ellery Studio who runs Speculative Futures Berlin. That whole thing, the Speculative Futures chapter, is based in the Design Initiative. So the Design Futures Initiative is a thing that has been coined for I think about 10 years, and it was developed in California in the US, and it has chapters all around the world. So every a major city might have another Speculative Futures chapter, and we are, as Ellery Studio, hosting the Berlin chapter and the Berlin events, and we are really proud of that because we have been active for 7 years now, I think, and we have about a community reach of about 3,000 to 4,000 people, which we can reach with our posts and also with our events. So We try to keep this really regular. We try to bring in many people, many different speakers, and so we are doing this today as well. Ellery Studio, I said it. This is us. A very, very new photo of us. Actually, we have been waiting on this for a while, but this is us at our latest launch event where we launched the so-called EQT toolkit as a toolkit about diversity. And this is our current team actually. And yeah, a very, very nice picture where everyone is smiling, either it was either fake or really smiling. I don't know. It was with the photography, you know, but nice picture anyway. This is us. For those of you who haven't been here, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction into what Ellery Studio does as a company. We have those basically these three pillars is how we define ourselves, because we have a very diverse team with diverse expertise, and we situate ourselves in the context of anticipation. So future studies and foresight is a really big part where we engage in participation, innovative formats to basically bring people together, bring target groups together, and engage in foresight. On the other hand, we also try to make people understand content. So it's also about the science communication in that part, complex information that is then not only disseminated, but also brought to the point in, for example, infographics and just appealing design formats. And later, we don't want to just disseminate information or really just bring it about, but we also support change, basically transformational processes in companies, on a societal level, in the public sector, and on a very low scale with different target groups. So this is basically what we do in a nutshell. We have here a few in this little diagram. We have here a few actually of our formats that we engage with. You see probably some recognize the speculative design, obviously, which we are engaging with today. More the workshop moderation part, that is also a broader thing, design thinking, futures literacy, but also the part of storytelling and comics, where we get into the actual illustration of things and bringing down complex information into appealing formats. So, you know, I know sometimes the diagram can be a bit much, can be a bit confusing. But if you want to bring it down to three things, it's really about we bring people together by providing the tools to just initiate participation and then reach or iterate the goals that they have. And this is for us a really important process, because we always want to bring the people into it, and we want to work with people in order to bring about change. Here is again the Speculative Futures Berlin. We are here today just to gather insights and to gather information. Sometimes it's really about showing how research is done, how things and projects are going. But we also have a little bit of a even though it's a broad one, but we have a little bit of a focus in what Speculative Futures Berlin obviously does. And if you can see here, our little logo in the middle, we situate ourselves sort of in a bubble of future studies, obviously, design futures, art futures, design fiction, and speculative design. This is really our focal point here. And obviously, this falls under the imagination of different and diverse futures. And this is a really important part for us, because we think that without, you know, consciously and consciously thinking about the future or consciously engaging with the future, we don't think the goals can be fully assessed or iterated, whatever goals that might be. So, and this is something. This is a point where I want to say that, of course, you're welcome to connect with us, because it's really something where we in every format that we do here, we want to bring in new people, and we want to bring in new ideas. And I want to invite you, because this year we also trying a little bit of a different approach. We want to create a little bit of a culmination of events, fewer events, but bigger, in the sense that we bring in more speakers. So if you would like, just if you haven't already, like to follow us, you see here the channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter still wrong logo, but on X we also there. Meetup, obviously, some of you may have signed up through this, and another very important one, if you want to connect with us, or if you just ask a question, if you have an idea for something you could contribute, just go to or send us an email via info@speculativefutures.de, and then we can get in touch and yeah, talk to each other. All right, and now enough from me, because we will move on to what is really important today, namely the role of storytelling, and this is told by Puno and Hope. As I said, both award-winning speakers have been in the business of storytelling and poetry for a long time, and they will take us now on a journey um, through Africa's past and Africa's future, and then we are able to imagine that with them. So if you don't have already, put your hands together virtually, whatever. I think they deserve a big round of applause. We're so happy you're here, and welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sebastian. It's also always awesome to see the overview of the community that's out there, the wonderful work that's happening, that's preparing us for the future, but the level of intentionality in which you're taking us there. So to everybody, my name is Puno, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague and sister in poetry, Hope, who's going to start us off with the journey, looking at the past, looking at identities. She'll introduce herself. She is incredible. She's been on the producer, behind the scenes level. She's been on camera. She's been on stage, but she's a champion behind the mic. And yeah, I'm very keen to also be hearing and learning from her, and even more so together with everybody.
Fantastic. Hello to everyone. I just want to, first of all, just appreciate everyone for joining in with us, connecting with us tonight, so afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We really do appreciate you taking your time and connecting with us, like I said. I have been falling asleep with both my hands pressed against my chest. In the past, there was an afternoon where I put an ice pack over it, heart as heavy as traffic on the Johannesburg highway during knockoff hours. I am aching. Mamita enters the room where I sleep randomly to give me a hug and tells me she loves me. She is a child and knows nothing, but this child is helping me heal. On the Sunday, I bought a book and a hat, got home and wrote poems made of hot dust. You could swear I am alive still, but nothing in me is breathing. With my hands, I trace the outline of where used to be my pulse. There is no motion there anymore. I sing hymns on the reformed booklet and convince myself that the Lord is near to me, that I too am the sheep of his pasture, his people. I am David lamenting over his dead son. I am spread out on the ground, refusing to be touched. I am refusing to eat. I am inconsolable. I am wounded. I think also just to mention that this is just one half of a piece. The second half I will do towards the end when we do our closing poems. I will go back to the first half just to make sure that everybody is still connected with the thread of the story as it carries on. So the second part will really just be imagining a better perspective to the first half, so a brighter one. Rungano namaskitane. These are the two words that take me back to a time where words first found me. We are children seated on the ground playing with stones in a stone world. This is after school, during the school holidays, weekends, or any other time really when children come together to play. These two words, although different, when defined, come down to the same or similar meaning. The word rungano, when translated, means a spoken word form of storytelling related to a person or persons without any boundaries at all. Maskitane, on the other hand, is a form of storytelling that involves stones and pens. In the stones, in a different shapes, in sizes, they represent the characters. So the storyteller sits down on the ground with a few other people with them. Those other people are there only as listeners. And in the silence, the listeners listen as the storyteller takes them on a journey to an alternative reality, a different world, an other world. Another way in which stories held on to me is probably what is most common or familiar to Black people in Africa, stories around the fire. I like to put it this way, that instead of saying we sat around the fire and the fire kept us warm, we sat around the fire and the stories kept us warm. All of us seated around the fire, taking turns and rotating between listening and narrating. This practice of rotating back and forth between these two elements, if I can put it that way, is how a great storyteller is established, through the practice of listening and paying attention, not only to themselves as an individual, but also to the people and the world around them. Stories are powerful. They are powerful enough to make a community out of people, but also they're powerful enough to destroy a community of people. And this is why there has to be a delicacy when we approach stories and storytelling, because the stories require in themselves to be told with a form of sensitivity. Because when a narrative is built, it begins to take form and shape. And this is happening whether it is good or bad, it will always take form and it will always take shape. Now, the role of storytelling in Africanfuturism, I think that despite any form of storytelling that we endeavor into, because I think storytelling is broad in the sense that there are different avenues in it. You know, there's poetry, there is spoken word, other people storytell through music, songwriting, through screenwriting, a different array of storytelling. But I think despite the sphere that we each find ourselves in, the important thing and the thing to always kind of fall back into is that, in essence, at the very core of it, the role of it should be to build and to rebuild. It should be to dream up a better world, to express our truth, to pour love and to reflect, to grieve, to storytell as a way of grieving, as a way to help each other mend, as a way to help each other smile, as a way to help each other see better, as a way to challenge ourselves and the people around us to different perspectives, and to reflect and to question other forms of perspectives that we have held onto in the past that perhaps are not working for us, that perhaps keep coming back and settling back to the same outcome when we are looking for different outcomes. To look at those things and say, well, what can we change? You know, is there something to change? Is there something to adjust? And if it is there, you know, how can we come together? How can we collaborate and find a way that moves us forward in a way that ends up shaping us into better people, into better storytellers? I have the privilege of teaching a group of young girls, really just facilitating them in their storytelling journey. And recently I got asked the question, what makes a story beautiful? And my response to that, I responded and said, well, instead of us asking ourselves what it is that makes a story beautiful, that perhaps we should ask ourselves what makes a story truthful, what makes it honest. Because I think when we are coming from a place of honesty, that the story, whatever story we are telling, and however, in whatever form we're telling the story, that at the end of the day, that the way that people are going to resonate with the story is whether or not it's honest. I think that becomes essential, to always look at the stories that we're creating, the stories that we are putting out, to say, am I being honest? And it doesn't necessarily even have to be a question we ask ourselves if the story or the experience is something that we're drawing from our own experiences. I think that we can ask ourselves the same question, even if we are drawing from other people's experiences. other people's walks of life, that despite where it is that we're drawing from, the question still stands: is the story honest? Because if it is honest, then it is necessary. But another thing to mention is that, the story is always trying to make its way to us. It never gives up on us. Sometimes it's trying to make its way through us. It looms into the future and then stares back at history. It leans over to us. And if it finds in us a place to settle, it will ask of us this question: what future will you build for the world with all this power of storytelling in your hands? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oak. I think you pose some really important questions for us in that, and just the eloquence and the grace in which you present that, and you pose those questions to us and make us think and make us realize again the importance of storytelling. And I love what you said about we need truthful stories more than we need beautiful stories. And I don't know if you'd mind just posing those specific questions again before we go into our breakout rooms, as we're going to probably discuss those very questions in those various rooms. Yeah, and then we'll come back and kind of give a bit of feedback before we go into the next part of the session.
Right. The questions, I'm trying to find them on my notes here. But I think I was just asking, like, it was also really a question that one of the students had asked me, what is it that makes a story beautiful, and me just trying to redirect them that perhaps instead of asking ourselves that question, what we should instead be asking ourselves is it honest,
Brilliant. I think that's going to be the question that we're going to discuss in our breakout rooms of what are the beautiful stories, what makes a story beautiful, and furthermore, what makes a story truthful, and what of that can we take into the storytelling that we want to use in crafting the future, whether it's the global future or whether it's the future of Africa specifically. So I'm going to hand over to the editing team as they work their tech magic and divide us into our groups. Please feel free to join the breakout room on the side, introduce yourself to the people that you're with if you want to. We'll be popping in and out to have conversations with you as well. Yeah, and feel free to share. If you don't want to share, if you just want to lean back and listen, that's also perfectly fine. And then we'll be back in the next 5 minutes.
So, pardon me. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing?
Hi.
Hello. Is this recorded? What is the recording by Ellery Studio participant?
So I think they're recording 1 or 2 of the breakout sessions for internal use. But if you don't want them to record, I think you can either leave the room or ask them to not use it. Yeah, but I think it's purely for their record keeping, my understanding.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
No worries. I mean, I can see everybody's names, but I don't know if you guys want to maybe introduce yourselves, where you're from, what are you doing? Yeah, and what brought you to this talk specifically?
Well, I can start. I'm Mercedes. I'm from Mexico City. So for me, it's like midday, almost. I got interested in this event for 2 reasons. One, I work with storytelling, like that's like my branch of work, both like futures and non-futures. And I totally agree with this idea that the story that we create and that we tell ourselves is very powerful, either in a constructive or a destructive way, both on a personal and a collective level. And in a personal way, I do think that we are in a little bit of a storytelling crisis, not in the sense that we're not hearing stories, but that we are hearing a lot of scary stories, a lot of divisive stories, a lot of stories that instead of promoting a better future for all, are more like a divided future. And I really admire all the things that you are doing in the Afrofuturism and reshaping your own stories, because I think that from the Latin American perspective, we really would use to do the same exercise.
That's incredible. And I've never heard that term before, the fact that we're in a story crisis or storytelling crisis. I think, I think that's a beautiful way to put it, because I mean, so the methods of storytelling have changed. So now we go online to receive our stories, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, whatever. It's no longer just the human sharing over a coffee or over around the fire, like Hope said. And going to those questions, the truthfulness of those stories. I mean, you throw AI into the mix and it's chaos. So how do we get back to authentic stories and stories that play the role of storytelling, like actually connect people, educate, all of that stuff. I love that. Anyway, anyone else would love to share?
Sorry, I have to leave, and I guess I don't want to disturb you, but I just want to say it's just incredible what energy you bring to this room, both of you. You're just the rhythm, like, that's probably the only thing I want to leave, the rhythm of a story and the, embodied ways of a story. I mean, this is just a bit of it was very inspiring. So thank you, and enjoy all of you the rest of the workshop or the webinar. Ciao. Thank you.
You are absolutely kind. Thank you, Eva Maria. Eva Maria, I think I want to say. I really appreciate the contribution and your kind words.
Thank you so much, Puno. Bye. Bye.
Isabel, Lillian, anyone like to
I
share?
will continue. Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm from Berlin. And I'm actually really interested in this topic because I agree storytelling is such a powerful tool to create an image, to create a vision. And I think if you how you tell a story makes the difference. So I'm so interested in what you like talking about, how you see it, what is your perspective. So that's why I'm here, and thank you so much.
No, of course. I'm loving the reasons and the level of interest. And I think the biggest thing is understanding what you said, the tool, the storytelling tool, and how powerful it is. Because I think when the tool of storytelling lands in the wrong hands or is mastered by the wrong people, it can shape the world in a very destructive way. And I think this is why we're here, is to put it hopefully in the hands of the right people. I love that. Lillian, Hank, I see other names.
Let me take a stab at this. I didn't get in immediately, but if your question is why are we interested in this topic, let me just echo the Isabel and Lillian who spoke before. And I'm very concerned about the crisis of storytelling and people telling very negative stories, which especially online, which influence thousands of people. And I want to learn more about how to go against those stories or turn them around with better stories of our own about better futures.
Absolutely beautiful. We have 20 seconds left. So now, Lillian, go in response and in adjacent to Hank.
I'm here because I work with storytelling, studying energy futures. So I thought that it was an alternative methodology to make something complex accessible.
This meeting is being recorded.
we're probably going to wait for everybody to trickle back in from these breakout rooms. It almost feels like we could have gone on forever in those breakout rooms, but we will have a second stab at having discussions, and you'll continue with the same groups that you were in, so you'll be able to continue the conversations where you left off. I'm going to give a little bit of feedback so long from the room that I was in, and if anybody else wants to jump in and share maybe some feedback about what they spoke about. I think for us, we kind of took it from the angle as why join this conversation, why even log into the session this evening if you're somewhere where it's nighttime, or this afternoon. And for us, it was the main thing that came out is this almost sense of urgency, and also seeing how important it is because we're in a storytelling crisis. We recognize the power that the powerful tool that storytelling is, and just how much it's being misused at mass scale, influencing thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of people across the planet. Because if you think of your cell phone, you've been given a storytelling tool that's in your hands. Anyone can use it, which is amazing. Decentralizing the narrative is an amazing thing, but we know that comes with a lot of risks, which means we have the responsibility upon ourselves to make sure that we are helping guide people, that we're educating people, that we're making sure things like hope and goodness, and like Hope said, truth is still a very much part of that narrative. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody else would like to unmute and maybe share what was the conversation, or even in the introductions that you had that stood out. I think people are feeling a little bit shy. Alex, I see your question in the chat box that yes, we'll definitely reiterate the questions before we go into the next breakout. I can actually let you know now in advance. What we'll do for the next breakout session is I'm going to do some poetry now, and then we're going to go into a little bit of a discussion, or I'm going to present just a little bit of my thoughts. And then in the breakout rooms, there'll be 3 questions. You don't have to discuss all of them. You can choose the one that matters to you most, but it'll basically be around what are your perspectives currently about Africa? Because obviously we're talking about African storytelling specifically. What are your current perceptions, perspectives? What would we like them to become? How, if we want to go into the sort of the bright future or the bright continent, which I'll bring in as a concept later. And then lastly, how can we get there? What are the steps to shaping that narrative? Because again, love what Sebastian presented in the beginning, that it's good to have these speculative conversations, but if it doesn't turn into action, yeah, we're not really doing much. So I'm going to jump straight into the conversation that we're having. Again, thank you so much to Hope, who set us up beautifully with a perspective of the importance of stories, the depth that lies in stories, and also where we come from in our history and our identities, and again, needing the authenticity and the integrity of the truth of the story. I'm going to introduce myself in the form of poetry, but basically I'm a poet, I'm a performer, I'm an entrepreneur. This is what I do for a living. I'm a communication specialist. I live in Pretoria, South Africa. Currently, I'm in the USA, so it's also midday. For me here, this side, I've survived jet lag, and it's just so awesome to be able to go across the globe, to be able to present this new perspective of Africa. So yeah, I'm going to go into my introduction poem and then we'll hit it off. I am Puno the poet. I invite you to understand my words and me. I've been told that I should have been born bitter and angry. In some spaces, I am too woman, too black. The words I utter, too woman, too black. But I say no. My words are birthed from the soil in my own chest. People keep digging graves with every phrase, but I'm planting flowers instead. I am not angry. I am brave. I am not abrasive. I am determined. I am not too woman. I am woman enough. I am not too black. I am a dark chocolate delight. And I will work these words and toil the soil until the joy in my bones grows. Yeah, this tongue is sharp, and I will shape my own exceptional reality using only the finest materials like hope and humanity. So, what will your words be? Choose wisely, and let's use words that grow well here in Africa. So that piece is a piece that I use whenever I perform and yeah, just to introduce myself. And it came from a collaboration with a whiskey company, funny enough, who landed in South Africa in 16, whenever back then. And they were told that the project or the initiative that they wanted to do in order to grow, is it the wheat or the barley to create the whiskey, was never going to work because the ground was too hard, the weather, the climate, yada, yada, all these negative things. But they went on with it. And today they are the biggest whiskey distillery in the whole of Africa, on the whole continent. And they commissioned me to write a poem basically about hope and find the parallel between their story and my story. And the thing is, with being from Africa, there's a lot of negative perceptions because we're defined more by our problems than by our opportunities. In the conversations that you have, in the interactions that you have, that is the starting point. And it is not my life's work to prove people wrong. I'm not going to put my energy into proving people wrong, but I'm not going to live according to those narratives purely. And I think by virtue of just living, by being, by showing up, by not just taking up space, but by participating in spaces, I think the narrative will change over time. And also just helping people shape and shift those perspectives. I think I also don't blame people. I think especially from a global community perspective, what's available to people on the news, what's available to people in storybooks. I mean, kids read the most shocking things sometimes. It's so limited, and it was written by people who maybe were on the outside and didn't have a full picture, or who just didn't have the empathy for the continent. So I understand, and I carry that heart, but at the same time, it's like, okay, cool. Now that I know that there's a flawed perspective and narrative out there, what am I going to do about it? And and it's like the poem said, it's not coming from a place of anger. It's coming from a place of bravery. It's not coming from an abrasive place. It's coming from a place of courage. It's from showing up in a certain way. I'm more than just my blackness. I'm more than just my womanhood, but I incorporate that. My narrative, my words, my approach is based on hope and joy, and wanting to bring out the best in people, all people. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through a little bit of a talk here. Let's see if I am tech savvy enough to do this. Success. I'm really sorry for all the designers who are looking at my screen and judging me for using Canva. As a lay person who does not do design for a living, this is what I have in my hands to use. So with Africanfuturism, I had to ask myself, I had to sit down and be like, when I think of Africa, what are the first 5 questions that pop up in my mind? And honestly, the very first word that popped up into my mind was poverty, was the first thing that came up. Let me just go to my list here. Poverty was the first one that came up. Home was the second one that came up. Youth/potential, because we are the youngest continent in the world. Like, I hear of populations that are declining, that are like aging too much and not producing enough kids, and that's so wild for me to think of, because we're just popping babies at any given rate, and our average age in terms of population is 19. So we really have a healthy, strong, full of potential continent, people who are ready and active, almost like seed beds awaiting to grow. But with that said, the fourth term that came to my mind is unemployment. I mean, in South Africa alone, we have an unemployment rate between the ages of 18 to 25 of about 54%, if I have this statistic right, which is crazy to think that more than half of our young people are unemployed. That is insane to think of. I haven't looked at the most recent stats, but it definitely hasn't necessarily improved dramatically. I think there has been some slight improvements, but that is not just from the person who's uneducated or the person who's unemployable, because that's also a stat that we take. But this is across the board. You could have a master's or a PhD, etc. And that's why we drive innovation more. That's why the narrative is really about entrepreneurship and all of those things. But unemployment is still such a huge issue for us. The next one that came up was joy. I think when I think of Africa, I think of the vibrancy, I think of the colors, I think of the music, I think of the art, and that always instills a sense of joy. So one of the questions that we'll discuss again in our breakout rooms and that I pose to you is, what are the words that come up for you when it comes to Africa? What is the first thing that pops up in your mind? And just words. It doesn't have to be concepts. It doesn't have to be themes. So put that in your back pocket, and you can take a screenshot if you want to. What 5 words come to mind when you think of Africa? Why it's important for us to have this conversation is because words create worlds, essentially. I love to give the example. A friend of mine told me that about back in the day, the Greek philosophers sat around, ate grapes draped in beautiful, white linen or whatever. And the concepts and the thoughts that they thought of back then still sort of shape our reality and shape our worlds now. Before anything starts, it starts with a word, whether it's an idea, whether it's a business, whether it's a project, whether it's an art piece. There's words that form in your mind, or concepts or ideas, and that's what essentially comes out and becomes something. So that's why it's important for us to have this conversation and again shape the world that we want to exist in, and also fight back against the world that we don't want to exist in. I mean, we're speaking about, or let me put it like this: Africanfuturism is a term that was coined by Nnedi Okorafor, who's based here in the US, but is a Nigerian author. And she's a science fiction and fantasy author. And for me, the reason why we picked the quote, which I'll read right at the end of hers, is the fact that we have to start thinking outside of the boundaries of what we see as possible, of what we've interacted with, and of our experiences. We almost have to go otherworldly in order to make meaningful change, in order to shift things in a way that matters, to shift the needle. If I want that 54% unemployment to go down to 10%, in the US, I heard this week that it's only 3.75% unemployment, which is absolutely unimaginable for me. There is no way we're going to go from 54% to 3.75% by doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We have to create new worlds, and words come first in that process as well. So instead of being known as the dark continent, it would be so nice to be known as the bright continent. Because if I look at historically what Africa has been known as, going to Hope's point of looking back before we look forward, historically how Africa has been kind of positioned is seen as an opportunity for resources, an opportunity to take, essentially an opportunity to expand kingdom, to expand sovereignty, all of those things, and in need of saving. Africa has always been seen as the place that's in need of saving. It's been seen, like I said, as the dark continent because it was seen as unexplored, seen as people are not that intelligent there, or they are maybe, what's the word, like savage. They are not Christian, because there's a lot of Christian settlement that came in on the continent. And again, attached to that was, okay, cool. Because of that, they are in need of saving. Then life changed, things changed, colonialism, imperialism, all of that ended, all of that stuff, which is great. But it was still seen as the third world, the developing world, and attached to that, because they're the third world, because they're the developing world, they are in need of saving. Now, I think we're at a point where it's like, wow, Africa's the youngest continent in the world. It's full of potential. There's so much that could be, and it's in need of saving. And in all of this, I think for me, what's missing is, what is Africa now? What is good about Africa? Yes, we've got a plethora of things that are not good and that are toxic, really, and that are heartbreaking. There's a lot of suffering on the continent, and I absolutely will not minimize that. But surely those are not the only things that define us. Surely that's not the only thing that shapes our reality and our futures and who we are. The greatest resource that Africa has are its people, which has been stripped from us in a very big way. Yet we continue to thrive in other ways. Yet we are still resilient. We're still building. We're still going towards the future. So instead of using begging, asking, needing, disempowering language, which doesn't create an atmosphere for meaningful change. Innovation cannot take root in an atmosphere where we're using disempowering language. We need to cultivate the soil, the atmospheric soil, using words, the seeds that will eventually grow. We need to create new cultures and new psychology and move away from the psychology of dependence and move to more towards a psychology of not just independence, but partnership. I truly believe in global partnerships. Africa has as much to offer the world as the world has to offer Africa as well. Another thing that when we're talking about words that shape worlds, is that flawed perceptions are the things that were used to justify some of the atrocities of the past. So even though the atrocities of the past have been removed, do those flawed perceptions that were used to justify really cruel things, do they still exist in us as individuals? Hence that first question, what is our true perception of Africa as those who are in Africa and those who are outside of Africa as well? So we're trying to create a new world. We're basically, for all the design community in the room, let's rebrand Africa. If you've done any rebranding project, you know that even if a business is not doing well, or if a business is trying to change their strategy, before the strategy is changed, before the implementation process has even started, they rebrand. So can we rebrand the narrative of Africa, the image of Africa, instead of using poverty porn to try and get people to participate? Are there other more hopeful things that we can use as a narrative in order to draw people in? I, as an individual, want to be able to enter a space knowing that I'm competent in some things, that I'm still learning in some things, without a person being like, oh, she's probably just the exception to the rule, without them trying to negotiate in their mind, like, oh, she's probably different because of this, because of that. Can I just be considered the norm? Can the way I speak, the way I dress, the way I am, the way I participate in the world just be seen as the norm? Because there are hundreds and thousands more, millions more of hopes and punos out there. And we just happen to be the ones who get to interact on global platforms. But can we be seen as the norm and no longer just the exception to the rule for whatever reason? So we need new words. We need a refresh. We need a rebrand, and we want to be known as the bright continent. And that, for me, is what African futurism is about. These are some examples. Even when I did a talk at Republica in Berlin last year, I did go into what are the examples that we see out there, because I do think it's possible. And these are the ones that inspire me. Number one, Black Panther. Hands down, still one of my favorite Marvel movies of all time, if not my favorite movies in general. Just because they were able to represent people of color, Africa and African culture in a way that was so aspirational and inspiring that it didn't just inspire Black people, African people, it inspired everybody. It was so radical in how they presented us as innovators, as intelligent, which is not the norm. It's not the expected thing. There's a TED talk by a young British young boy who looks about 13, 14 years old. And he says that in his lifetime, he believes that Africa will be one of the mega giants financially. And he weighs up the different statistics of the GDP of America and Great Britain in comparison to African countries. And that kind of language, somebody to go on a TED talk as young as he is, to believe in that and to say that this is important to talk about, and here's the data and the stats to back it up, for me is incredible. The idea of rebranding Africa as the bright continent came from an Instagram page called The Bright Continent, which I encourage everybody to follow. And they're not there like me now on a soapbox saying, this is what I think, this is how we should think, this is what we should do. They just post pictures, and all they've done is to change the angle, if I can use that term, change the angle, to change the lighting, to change the colors, to present what you would usually see as poverty porn as something really good. I mean, you can see the hues, the bright orange and sort of brownish hues that are being used there, presenting Africans skating, and it's such a cool, the angle of shooting from below and seeing a larger person. We know it does something in our psychology. It's in those micro ways in which we can counteract microaggressions, essentially. My family, for me, is an inspiration as to what a hopeful narrative can be. I think I was born into a family of really bold and brave women, specifically of incredible, strong men who are pillars, who give space for womanhood to be. We have a mixed race family from different cultures into marriage. And for me, I'm just like this. That kind of feels like the Africa I want to be a part of, where people are always willing to grow. I mean, my parents were born in a village. My brother and sister were born in what we call a township, or what you would call maybe not really a slum. That's a bit of a hectic word, but more of like a shanty town vibe. And I was born in the suburbs, and now we all kind of live in the city. All of these different experiences, we don't look down on one or the other, but we kind of say, this is our timeline, this is our story, this is where we come from. We take out the strengths and we present it as positive and hopeful. Next, we've got Trevor Noah. I mean, he's one of the most revered, and we look up to him in South Africa, not just because of what he's been able to do on a global level and being in America and being on The Daily Show, hosting his own comedic shows, but he's won Grammys. I mean, this is a picture of him winning the Grammy. And he's intelligent. And the way, if you watch his comedy shows, and I'd encourage you to do so on Netflix, the way he brings in political narratives, political stories, and education with humor, it's so relatable and accessible. It doesn't put people off. It's not like, oh, somebody droning on and on telling us about what we should think and what we shouldn't think. It almost partners with you. It entertains you. It makes you smile from the inside out, yet you walk away having a different perspective of Africa. And of course, Nnedi Okorafor, who's the one that we're speaking about today, or who at least inspired this talk. And I just want to read the quote here, which you might have seen on the invitation. African futurism is concerned with visions of the future. It is interested in technology. It leaves the earth. Skews optimistic, is centered on and predominantly written by people of African descent, and it is rooted first and foremost in Africa. It's less concerned with what could have been and more concerned with what can be, what will be. It acknowledges and grapples with and carries what has been. So there's that tension again of what can be, what's possible. If we were to remove everything we knew and just were given a big whiteboard, and that's why we're going to have a Miro board session just now, what's possible? If we had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, what could we do? And that's when the best ideas come from, playing in that space as well. So basically what I'm saying is, by holding on to memory, but also holding on to some imagination, or exploring some imagination, what can we create? Because it's important. It's so important for us to reshape and to interrogate the current, again, perspectives that we have, but again, looking at what could be. So this is what I'm going to leave you with. We really want to address the limited, anorexic, anemic sort of versions of Africa that we have in our head. And instead, we want to move towards that fresh, rebranded approach of Africa, the bright continent. We want to have hope. We want to understand that the only thing dark about Africa, which is one of my favorite quotes, the only thing dark about Africa is our ignorance about it. We want to educate ourselves again. It's when you understand a person, when you share a meal with a person that's not from where you're from. Another favorite quote of mine is that it's very hard to hate when you're up close, when you see the same flaws in another person that you have, the same strengths in another person that you have, all of those different things. We need to understand that the problems that Africa has is not just Africa's problems. It's not just Africa's fault. Yes, we have our own weaknesses, we have our own flaws as people, but because there were so many systems, so many diverse systems that were superimposed on us, that were coerced onto us, it's like putting the wrong shoes on the wrong feet and then expecting a person to run a marathon, or cutting them off the knees and expecting them to run a marathon. We need to have empathy towards where we come from and be like, okay, cool. Now that this is the reality, how are we going to go forward? We need to change the way we speak and depict Africa in our conversations and in our content. We almost have that responsibility as a global community. And you can discuss in your groups, like, why does it matter for you who's in Helsinki or in Berlin or in Mexico or in New York, wherever you're sitting? Why would it matter for you to be able to present a new and different narrative about Africa? I think the answer to that is because we are innovating globally, whether it's AI, whether it's whatever, we're innovating globally, and the global community needs each other in order for us to grow, whether it's from an economic or cultural level. Innovation will not flourish in Africa unless we change the narrative in which we speak about ourselves and which the world speaks about us as well. And the only way for us to solve some of the solutions, to go from 54% unemployment rate to 3.75 unemployment rate, is through innovation, is through creativity, it's through art, and it's by building new worlds with new words. So that's me. That is what I have to share with you. I know it's a lot, it's a huge download, and that's purely because I'm super passionate about it. But I would love for us to go into the breakout rooms and maybe discuss these questions. You can maybe take a picture on your phone if you want to have it on hand. We can post it in the chat. We can, just maybe take a screenshot with your computer as well. And then we'll meet back here in 5 minutes time.
Recording progress. Nice.
I've done so much talking, so I'm done. So you guys talk now.
Yeah, but it was super cool. Like, I love when you're reading your poem, and then there was such a crazy rhythm, like really strong, beautiful rhythm that I was like, do we write it somewhere or do we talk? We talk.
I think let's just discuss. Yeah, I'd love to hear your guys' voices.
Yeah. Okay, since I'm already speaking, I will start with the first one. Music. That's my association, and comes from like amount of music that comes from Africa, like, you know, across centuries, and also from my friend. And she's, I mean, I met her. She's not living close by. I just met her for like half a year, 2017, and she was a rapper from Namibia, and she was really good. So it kind of even established a bit more this music. And I guess like music is probably more present, is very present. I mean, but Africa is big, no? Probably depends in which place, but overall, that will be my first. So maybe let's make a round.
Yes, that's spot on. The rhythm that's in music is just, it's in us, it's in our souls.
Exactly. And I felt like you were telling your poem and it was like this rhythm. Crazy.
Absolutely.
Let's say the maybe first word, everybody. What do you think? Or should I say 5 words? Yeah, maybe. Maybe you guys take over. So we're not only talking.
I can give the ones I just jotted down when you first mentioned it. Was home, care, joy, vibrancy, and grief. Yeah, I guess context, the other guys have had a little intro, but I moved to Berlin 2 years ago, but grew up in Cape Town. Culturally, I feel very South African. I'm half German, came back here. Well, I mean, I grew up in Cape Town, but moved here, and I've just spent the last 3 months back home, and I've come back like quite energized, and there's just something in the air and with the people that just is unparalleled. And so my eyes are definitely south, my heart's on the continent, and I've got a lot of love for it.
That is incredible. I absolutely love that. And I do love that you added the word grief in there, because it's true. But it really is hugged by that vibrancy that you almost can't explain. You just have to be there to experience it. That's awesome.
Can I ask about this grief? Like, is it like in a specific context, or is it like overall feeling?
I guess just
history.
You confront historical legacies every day living in South Africa, and there's just a certain grief that you do feel there, and I think it's like maybe across the continent, it's similar experiences as like a white person, and I'm not necessarily saying this is exactly what it is, but it like obviously is important. I think Europeans aren't forced to confront some of the histories of why they are in the positions that they are, whereas in South Africa, you kind of live that and you feel it and you experience, and it's quite visceral. It's all around you, and it's something take in and you try and move through. And yeah, it's also the place where you grow up. There's just always going to be a certain level of grief as well, you know.
Yeah, thanks for explaining.
So true. I mean, even small examples like being a woman. The most I remember, I go on holiday alone every year, and I think 2 or 3 years ago they released an article that the place to travel in the world that's the most dangerous for a woman on her own is South Africa. Just that knowledge, it hasn't stopped me from traveling at all, but it's devastating to know that. Yeah, and also know that there's such a divide. There's some people in South Africa who will never know that reality because our divide between the rich and poor is so huge, but we all exist in the same space. You probably only encounter each other at like home affairs, like our government departments, really. Otherwise, you can live two separate worlds, really. Yeah. What are the other words that we thought of?
Tell guys, Alex and Flonnie, we have like 50 seconds.
Yeah, I'll tap on that. My word I've written was division, which is like pieces that I think of. I think of like you talk of grief, and I said like bitterness. I think there is a level of bitterness of what was, and obviously it evokes the spirit of like neediness of whatever's better. We're gonna throw ourselves in there so that we can because we divided and all these things. So yeah, that's the South Africa that I see now. That was the words that came. Yeah.
100%. Last 5 seconds. Who's got another word for us?
Alex.
Yeah, so
sorry.
Clearly 5 minutes is not enough. I would love for us to just pull up the Miro board. We're just going to put some of the words on there or any thoughts. I think Doma is going to help us with that and just to see what came out. Again, I love to describe the world that we're building almost as this big tapestry. And I know on TikTok and Instagram, like crocheting and knitting is back in fashion. So we're crocheting the world that we want to see, essentially, with words. And also bringing in some of our past with that as well. Oh, I love that I'm seeing. So the first 5 words: far away, rising, unknown, surprising, young. Oh, those are such good narratives. There are poems that can come out of this. Oh my goodness. Education, drought, young, nature, ancient, resilient, strong, forgetful, sure, innovative, creative, resourceful. New words. I love the new words that are coming here: inspiring, hope, unified, diverse, potential, creative, free, peaceful. From your mouth to God's ears. The first words, again, there was sense of ambivalence, opportunity, weight. That's a brilliant word. There's some resistance, there's art, there's interconnectedness, spiral time. Ooh, I'd love somebody to expand on that, and dance as well. Does anybody want to share something about what I just read out, or double click on it or anything like that before I read the others?
I would like to share. So Africa is home. I come from East Africa. And one thing that I think is interesting is from a Afrocentric position, like coming from the continent, I always think it's fascinating when we are speaking about things that are inspiring from the continent, but they seem to have like an element of the West in them. And what is really cool that we're starting to see people enjoying things that come from the continent that are independent of Western influence, that have always existed, but are now being called like new. So that's one of the reasons that one of the words that I had was free or underestimated. So like the new African Music Grammy that acknowledges the rising of African music. But people have been dancing to Fela Kuti since before the Grammys was a thing. So I just think when one of the people in our group said ancient, it's true. Africa is one of the oldest continents and has been home to some of the oldest civilizations as well. So the fact that the word young is repeated from a demographic view, yes, Africa is a young continent in terms of its demographic, in terms of its population, but not from in terms of the effects that it's had on people's culture, people's food, trade, innovation. From what it's given to the world, it's been giving since its birth. So I just think that we are young, but we're also quite an ancient home.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. Yes, because you're right. If we only use the word young, it gives the impression or the perception of a child that still needs to be taught how to walk, and that's not necessarily true. We were not found. We always kind of existed. We didn't start to exist only when people happened upon us. And like you're saying, our music, our art, our even the systems, the mathematic systems. I mean, we can start talking about Egypt. We can start talking about all the various ancient kingdoms. Those things were there for a very long time. So yeah, thank you for that point. Anyone else?
I would like to add
read the word.
something
Go
that
for it.
I thought but didn't put, and it was the word generous. Because I was writing like humanity itself started in Africa, but then part of the culture that we have in many different countries, not only food, but also music, but also a lot of terms are come from the mix from like Africa and the different places in the world. So I would say that's like also part of a generous culture.
I love that. I love that. And in the way we innovate and from an economics level, generosity for me is one of the most sustainable forms of doing economics. And it's something that we haven't really woven into. Yes, we've gone from like, should we do capitalism? Should we do socialism? Should we whatever? What does generosity as an economic model look like, or an element of generosity in our current economic models look like? It's things like that to look at how even ancient communities in Africa sustain themselves. We have something called stokvels in South Africa, which is a finance sharing model that is completely outside of formal financial models. And it's making things happen. There is so much money and there's so much finance in those communities. It started by like elderly mothers, elderly women in our communities, yet there are millions and millions and millions of rands that are in those areas. Like, how can we learn from things like that? How can generosity be more, just carry a bit more of a formal element and have a bit more weight on that? I'm going to read a few more questions or a few more words on here, and then I'm going to do a poem, and then I'm going to have to love and leave you. But we've got words like vibrant, we've got colorful. I love the informality. That's such an interesting one. I see the difference between even how meetings are conducted in Africa. Yes, I mean, we've got a big mix of the kinds of people that are in Africa. But if I were to generalize, meetings can last 3 to 4, 5 hours. In the first 2 hours of that, you're eating, you're meeting one another, you're getting to know one another. It's an informal setting because hearts need to connect before heads connect. So that's almost like also a strength of ours, but in some ways, when the two worlds of the very formal, strict time world kind of collide with that informal world, it becomes a bit interesting. There's beauty, there's other ways of knowing and doing. I love that. There's diversity, which we know that in any group or in any system, the most diverse element of any system is the strongest. So that's something to think about. Innovation, origin, ancestrality, definitely. There's a lot of ancestry, music, ancestral knowledge, definitely. We've spoken about that ancient element as well. Flavors, oh my gosh, absolutely. In the literal sense, in terms of food, but in all other senses, community driven, which is a very, very much a core anchor. The origin of life, that is an interesting one that we do not speak enough about. Alternative ways to live, definitely. And I think with COVID having happened and people realizing that there's elements of their own lives that are just unsustainable, I do hope that those alternative ways of living become more shared. There's inventions. I think I've already mentioned the resilience smiling, which is awesome. Again, diverse is written and art. I will close off this whiteboard session by saying every single thing that you guys have written down is true and is possible. And if it is not yet realized in our everyday as Africans, it's possible. And I will be bold enough to say that as an African, we need the global community to partner with us. And we also want to share what we have. I just believe in a common humanity in that sense. But I don't think what we're hoping for and what we're dreaming of is impossible at all. I'm going to share a poem with you that is called How to Wear Africa, if I can find it, and then I'm going to hand back to Sebastian. Give me a second, my apologies, my phone is being slow. Otherwise, I'm going to try and do it from my head and see how far of it I remember. Here it goes. Opening up is coming, it's coming, it's coming. Here we go. Africa, come with me. Lean in and listen. Lend me your attention for a second. We have worked, we have walked, and we have wandered. But my dear family, we have finally arrived. So let's go deeper. Let's dig deeper than the reductionist labels of third world and developing, using these terms to compare our apples to the world's oranges. If we keep trying to break our bones to fit into the world's mold, we will always lose. Africa, it is time that you do business like you, do family like you, do community like you, let it look like you, taste like you, feel like you, be true, and the trust will follow. For us, sustainable means that I do not live for you or for me, but for us, for we. That means we cannot allow money to dictate who we are. Who we are should dictate how we perceive and handle wealth. I implore you, do not trade yourself for a world-class status. I desire an African-class existence, an existence guided by our own essence, one of commitment, of respect, of non-conformity, not of begging, but of giving, of blessing from a belly of abundance, where we live big, bold, and bright, where we celebrate and ululate, where we understand that we are on holy ground. So we treat and treasure the soil as such, where we honor one another, where we house our neighbors. We have spoken about potential and change and possible possibility and possible profitability, but Africa is a lion, and lions don't do much speaking. We've been awake for centuries. It is not rising, it has risen. Its roar can be heard through the ages. We are tired of talking and waiting. We just want to take our rightful place in the jungle as king. We have all the tools and the intelligence. It is time to come together, dream together, and then act together. I would like to wear Africa again and for it to mean something. So leaders, artists, businesses, politicians, everybody, Africa is putting her trust and this challenge in your hands. Represent her well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. that is all from me. I'm going to share my screen again just in case anybody wants to get in touch with me. If you have more questions, I know Hope and the team will be here to answer anything, but please feel free to contact me, punoselesho.com. Also Harvest House, you can also contact us. We are your brave and bright communications, making your world more vibrant in every possible way. I just want to say thank you to you for arriving to this conversation, and that makes me quite emotional just to think that you regard it important enough to hear our stories, to hear our hearts, and may it make your world brighter. So thanks, guys, and have a very beautiful one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Puno. I hope you didn't leave already. This is your applause from everyone.
Thank you. I got it. Have a lovely one. Ciao.
Yes. Thank you, Puno.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been, I think that Puno has another engagement as it's still daytime where she is currently. So we will be opening up the whole floor now for everyone to ask questions, and Hope is still with us. So she is happy to answer or to engage in a conversation with you. And I think from our side, this has been amazing, also an amazing contrast to our last event, because the title was basically Without Words. We want to sense the future, and now it's about spoken words and the art of spoken words. And I think we all witnessed a very powerful way of doing that by Hope and Puno. And I was really flashed by this, and I'm really happy that so many of you joined for this session. So let's open it up for questions and comments and kind words, and yeah, words create worlds. So I really love that one. Just go ahead, raise your hand, unmute yourself, however that works for you, and we will find a way. I will wait if these words have taken you back. So there are no words left. Anything that's on your mind, you're also welcome, of course, to share it in the chat, to give any emotion. Yes, Stephanie, go ahead.
I'm going to dare to ask a question. Hi, thank you. This was really wonderful. Because I also noticed it wasn't just the words. I think it was just the whole being. The one question that I do have, though, we're talking about Africa, and in our little group, we actually touched on that. I mean, Africa is a huge continent, and I mean, there's so much. I mean, you have 1 million languages, you have so many cultures, whatever, and but you still, for me, it's so interesting. Do you connect more to Africa as a whole or to where you are? I think it's all, I can only ask. This is really, maybe it's a stupid question. I'm sorry, but for me, that kind of would be interesting, because I know, like in Europe, you know, people are saying, like, I'm German, I'm French, whatever, and rarely you would have people saying, yeah, I'm from Europe, you know. So for me, this would be very interesting to understand that more better. Or is it just that we're putting on this?
I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question. Is it do we connect? It's about connection. I think I captured that. Maybe if you can just like rephrase it for me, that might help.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to see. I always feel when I meet somebody from Africa, or yeah, who basically, and I ask them, like, so where are you from in Africa? Sure, they tell me like a country, which is, you know, maybe not even their, like, they're colonial countries. I mean, they're not, they were made, they were created, they are not natural. And on the other hand, this whole continent is there. And I always wonder, isn't it a shame? I mean, I think it's great that it's connected, that you feel as one in that way. And on the other hand, you do have roots where you're from in Africa. And sometimes I would love to know more about those roots. I don't know if I'm saying it right. I know it's maybe, like I said, maybe it's a stupid question, but I guess I'm just really curious how that is. I would love to sense it even more. And I think in the words, in the poems that you've already presented to us in that way as a present, I think says some of it, but still, I don't know. Sorry.
So it's all right. It's not a stupid question, you know. I might be struggling a bit maybe to grasp it, but it's not a stupid question at all. I mean, connectedness and our roots. Again, I'm really just going to try and sort of approach it in the way that I think maybe you mean, because still I'm not, yeah. But I mean, I suppose because, like, yes, we are Africans, and you know, not all Africans come from the same background or from the same roots. And I think what you're wanting to know is perhaps maybe you would want maybe for someone when they're describing themselves to sort of lean into more of where it is exactly, what it is exactly that their rooting is. And I think that's definitely different for, like I said, for you know, for us as Africans, because the threads are different. So yeah, I suppose it would depend then on the individual that is answering that. But yeah, I'm not sure if that helps.
It does. Yeah. I'm wondering how, yeah, I think that's perfect. Yes, I think that's great. Thank you.
It's all right.
Are there other questions, comments, anything that interests you? Yes, please. Jishi, if I said it right. Go ahead.
I have my camera off just because we have a lot of stuff going on in the house. But just to add on Hope's point, and also to answer Steph's question, for example, I identify with a group of people that I come from before I identify with my country. But my country is what is acknowledged by society. Therefore, apart from a tourist element of the group of people that I come from, and that I don't particularly enjoy. So I think for my great-grandmother, who lived until she was 117, she identified with her group of people, not her country, not the name of the country, because she was older than the country was, but she didn't acknowledge the country as her home because it was a colonial construct. But I've grown up in my country and I'm younger than my country. So I do have an association with this country because it's a country that has always been part of my identity. For my parents, however, who are older than the country, they identify with both their country and their group of people. Therefore, they've taught me how to do the same. So I think the threads are also intertwined within the family context, and also of how that identity was either bestowed on you or thrust upon you. So the identities that are thrust upon us, I think we take them with a little bit less, with a grain of salt, whereas the ones that are given to us, like the groups of people that we come from, so like, for example, I'm Kikuyu and Maasai, I'm very happy to identify like that, but then with society, they want to know which country I come from, because country and nationhood and statehood is what is identified, because those groups of people are not defined as countries, even though in themselves they were complete civilizations. So that is a colonial, I think. For me, I look at it as a colonial construct. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
may I just really quick, what it also reminds me, coming from Germany, having grown up in West Berlin, where the East doesn't exist anymore, and there's a country that doesn't exist anymore, that other half. And I think there's another, I could think about that. It's the other way around. People have lost their roots in that sense as well. So I think I'm trying to relate. That's the only reason why so I think I do understand this, the nation, and I think nations for me are always something that is not natural, at least from my point of view. I think that the family is a good aspect as well. So thank you. Sorry.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about your experience facilitating these storytelling girls. What do you think is the role of a facilitator in a space of storytelling, which is something unique? I facilitate storytelling workshop experience for you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, I think I got you. Your line was breaking a bit, but I think what you're asking is what do I think is the role of a facilitator? Right. I mean, so how my sessions are typically going is we will have some reading time, and just also like I'll also teach the kids the technical stuff of, performance, spoken word. But generally how it ends up going is they would just ask me questions, and I try to answer as best as I can and as honestly as I can. So they have a lot of questions, which is what I'm realizing that we end up conversing more than we are actually doing the spoken word, because they have a lot of questions, and I give room to that because I think it's important to try and answer those questions for them as much as I can. Yeah.
What kind of questions emerge?
So I'm not sure if you had my talk. So what in that I mentioned one of them was
yes,
the person that, yes. So what makes a story beautiful?
Yeah. So other questions would be around the storytelling process.
Yeah, it's usually around the process, and yeah, and then sometimes they'll ask like, why is it important that that we share? Why is it important that we write? And sometimes they will ask about my own process for writing. They'll ask about do I get nervous? What do I do when I'm nervous? So those little things usually coming up. I'm interested also in hearing what you think the role is as a facilitator to that.
Yeah, to me, I feel like it's, a little bit like, as you said, like holding the space, really, right? I always tell them like everyone has a story to tell. And I really like what you mentioned about the honesty. And so I think it's like holding space long enough for the story to emerge, because sometimes it's not that automatic. And holding this kind of things in Brazil, I felt like so many times that these girls, their imagination was so blocked by their current very oppressive reality, right? So it's, holding space long enough for their imagination to start to like ignite again. Yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. I love that.
May I ask how old the girls are, or is it just really a mix?
It's a mix. So it's starting from 16 all the way, no, actually 15. 15, 16, 17. Those are the ages. Yeah.
I have a very quick question regarding like this mix of the powerful stories, and then what are you seeing when you do these workshops with the girls about their own stories and the the words that they're using to create this new world or new perception about not only the continent, their nation, or like being a woman in Africa.
Right. So there seems to be a lot of heaviness, which is something when I initially started working with them was came to me as a surprise. I think also, especially looking at the age range, they're very young, and they talk about a lot of weighty things that you wouldn't imagine that kids in their age group, are already going through. So yeah, there's a lot of heaviness right now, but I have tried, and what we're doing from time to time is the practice of writing two ways. So to write whatever it is that they've that they're experiencing or facing, and often it's dark, and so now the challenge becomes looking at that, what you've written here, what your experience is here. Let's write up a different world that you would want ideally your world to look like. So that's been fun to do. Yeah, you see glimpses of lights here and there. So that's just really been a great journey, just walking through with them.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think that we can definitely continue this conversation. Yes, we have more time. Yeah, I just want to be mindful of everyone's time, and seeing that some people already had to go but have other engagements, or just in that sense maybe having dinner or lunch. I was the official part of this session, and hope will stay in a bit longer. So we have another a few questions, a conversation, but please let us also take a moment to just also thank Hope, since she's still here, for this wonderful session, the curation of it, and also just enlightening us with these words. I've received a few messages in the chat where I'm thank you for that. Really, that was an amazing session, truly. I kind of broke the chain of questions, I think, with my intervention. I'm sorry about that. I really encourage everyone to say things. Obviously, we have more time, so.
And I will go back.
Go ahead. In that sense, also, I have to apologize. Yeah. Sorry, Stephanie, please go ahead.
Okay. Now, Hope, I was wondering, with these, when you're facilitating, how long are these workshops? How long do you work with these girls or women?
Right. So we meet once a week for about an hour to an hour, and sometimes we go a little bit over time. So it will be an hour and a half, something like that. Yeah. So
and
it's
over a few months, or is it?
So it's happening on Mondays. So every Monday, and then when they're on the school break, then we'll just resume when when recess is over.
Oh, so it's just a continuous course in a sense. So you know them for a while.
I mean, I've only started working with them last year, so yeah. So it hasn't been too long. It's been only a few months. Yeah.
Have you noticed change already in their way of being?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think the exercises that I mentioned, because now even when we are not actively doing those particular exercises, I'm noticing that their writing isn't constantly leaning towards like the negative stuff. So I'd say yes.
So I wanted to ask if we wanted to start off a similar practice with like younger nieces and nephews, Hope.
Right.
What would you suggest a good way or a good starting point would be for those that are unable to access your amazing workshops or be part of or do you have like online way that people can participate? And the ages that I'm thinking about are 12 to 21.
12 to 21. I mean, we could always arrange like setups such as this, virtual setups because of the geographical locations. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely I could drop my email on the chat box and maybe you can get in touch and we can talk further on it.
Yes, please, that would be great.
Fantastic.
Hey, yo, can I just ask one question here? In your like doing workshops or maybe just in the line of work that you do you normally find maybe kids or people that you interact with normally getting maybe emotionally drawn to you maybe in the journey in like giving them perspective or just journeying with them and maybe they're getting like you can see that they're getting like emotionally drawn and how do you sort of maybe not like put the boundaries on but sort of like be so that when you say bye one day they don't get hurt and anything like that. Has that ever happened or yeah?
That's a good question. They do. They do get emotionally drawn. And this happens when, like, if we're just talking or when someone is sharing, a piece, or if I'm sharing something, because, I try to make it that I'm also interacting and participating in the activities that I give them. So I also get to share in as much as they're sharing. So yeah, there is that emotional response that I see. But I think what that has been doing is really just helping us to feel a lot safer with each other. So it's really helped just the space to feel warm and sort of like this at home feeling where they can freely express themselves. And just sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's not just the storytelling that we're doing, we're just sometimes having conversation, especially like now they've just come back from recess. So the first session was just about, how are they doing? How was their holidays? Just things like that, just getting them to talk and to connect with their feelings and their emotions. Yeah.
Is there anything else from anyone? I know you have lots of questions. Yes, Hank, please.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing, well, we talked, as far as I understood, about working in workshops with girls and young women, but do you have any experience about mixed workshops, young men and young women, girls and boys? And if you do, are those results of the workshop similar to what you were discussing or quite different?
Right. Thank you for that question. So I have had an experience with like a mixed group, but it was with much older people. It wasn't teenagers per se. So it was much older people. And for those particular instances, the theme and the subject that we were covering was gender-based violence, especially when we start to now debrief. There's always really interesting things coming up. Yeah, I mean, there's sometimes this, relatively problematic things, comments that come up. But, in those settings, usually I'm not I'm not alone. So there is people I'm collaborating with that are also there to, like, we help each other just sort of navigate through the whole session and how we're handling comments and, you know, things that people are saying.
Thanks for answering like that.
Okay. Well, in that sense, also from thanks everyone, and from our side, I think that it remains for me to put out my apologies to you for the digital hiccups this time with the passcodes and access to the Zoom link. If people missed the beginning, or if you if some of your fellow people have not been able to see the session or join in, we will have a recording that will be on YouTube and also will be shared on our social media channels. And we will make you aware of that through that. I think it remains to say that we're really happy that we always have such an international crowd, and everyone is coming in from all corners of the world, which is wonderful. Obviously, our speakers today, hope you're joining us from South Africa. This is wonderful, and we always appreciate this, and we hope we can get this going and grow the community, obviously, and we love every time new people come in. And of course, if the regulars join us again, Hank, Steph, I know you've been here, Bernard, you've been here for a couple times. So yeah, very nice of you to be here. And yeah, with that, I think we would close. And yeah, I don't think the last words belong to me this time. Hope you're the pro. Send us off.
And for me, it really is just to appreciate all of you for making the time. Like I said in the beginning, making the time to come and connect with us, and thank you for engaging as well, because that also helps me. You know, sometimes you're asking things that maybe I haven't thought about, and it also allows me to then, you know, look at those things that you're asking and think on that. So appreciate the fact that you were engaging and you were asking the questions. Appreciate that so much.